I'm AJ Gutierrez, the co-founder of Saga Education, and in this special episode, we're going to reflect on the themes discussed today with my AI and technology team so we can have a crucial conversation about equity and access and the intersection of AI and education. This is EdHead. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this special episode of EdHeads. I'm your host, AJ Gutierrez, and today we're going to have an opportunity to reflect on some of the themes and ideas that we've talked about alongside our journey to date about the intersection of artificial intelligence and education. And join with me today, we have Brett, Tom, and Sean. Will you all be willing to introduce yourselves?
Thanks, AJ, for having us. Tom Fishaber, Chief Technology Officer at Saga.
Hey, I'm Brett Milne, and I'm the Vice President for Product Research and Development at Saga.
And I'm Sean Kelly. I run engineering at Saga, Vice President of Engineering.
Awesome. And I'm so excited to have this discussion with each of you because it offers a chance for us to talk about AI and education from a different lens, right? From an actual practitioner's lens. All of you are actively involved in developing some sophisticated AI, although AI is a broad spectrum. We have a specific slice in that conversation. And I have, along the way, I've had a lot of time to do some soul searching. And a lot of that soul searching has come from a book called The Promises and Perils of AI in Education. Ethics and Equity Have Entered the Chat. Boom. I love that zesty title. And that book was written by Ken Shelton and Dee Lanier, who fortunately, Dee is actually going to join EdHead's podcast later this week. And so if you're listening in on this, please check out that episode. It should be really fun. From, my reading and reflections, I thought it would be a great opportunity to encourage lots of organizations to have crucial conversations about ethics, about equity. So with that said, I have a couple of questions teed up for you, and I'm really excited for an engaging conversation. And starting off with the first one from the book I just mentioned, and the quote is this: "A one-size-fits-all AI replicates existing disparities." And so I would love to hear from you. What does true co-design look like when partnering with the district to implement AI-driven solutions? We can look at Los Angeles, for example. LA jumped pretty quickly to launch and develop an AI chatbot. That organization that tried to create that tool is now defunct. There was issues with data breaches, and there's a lot we can learn from this experience. But what is your take on what does true co-design and customization look like?
I think it's a great question. I think I do think the one-size-fits-all is problematic for technology in general in education. Like, take the AI piece out of the picture, but like a lot of things you just said in that quote, I think technology over the history of how it's been used in education has often reinforced the things that aren't working for all students. And so, we could sort of rinse and repeat on that process with AI in education, or maybe there's an opportunity to do something better at this point. And the fact that I think you linked that to co-design is very interesting, sort of actually working with the people who are going to use the technology, whether that's students, whether it's teachers, whether in the case of Saga, that's tutors. I think that's sort of critical, and thinking about the individuals and like the way different individuals interact with the technology, and that you're not trying to come up with just a solution for the average student or whatever that would be, or maybe the students that are already doing well, but how do you come up with solutions that are going to work for individual students?
And my observation about when I first read this question about co-design, the thing that triggered was if you ask certain questions about certain bodies of knowledge, calculus, it hasn't changed in 400 years. So calculus is calculus, and it's kind of not changed much. So if you ask a question about calculus, you're liable to get an answer that kind of one size does fit all, because there was only one size. Now, it's very different if you ask a question about either something that's more current or more modern or more dynamic or more controversial or more filled with misinformation. And again, if the current way that if you ask questions about pedagogy and the pedagogy that the models were trained with are work for a certain select group of people, then you're not going to get the answer you want because the model just doesn't know. And so that is the thing that I think I'm sensitive to, is that it's the question that you ask is as important as the type of question you're asking informs your choice of technology and the extent to which you want to rely on that technology.
Well, when I think about co-design, it has been a true honor and privilege over the last 2 decades working with educators to try and build solutions that really work for them. And as Brent said, I'm going to go back to the one size fits all. There isn't one size fits all because every district has these unique needs. And so it's been really enjoyable and eye-opening to figure out and understand what they need and how we can design it. And we've really shifted from being a vendor to being a partner and a thought partner in this. I think a real challenge with AI is it's moving so fast, and districts really don't understand or are still grappling with, how do I deploy this and what do I deploy? And they're worried about, students cheating, and they're worried about teachers creating lesson plans that aren't accurate. And so when we're there, we're still in the nascent. I love the saying of AI is only going to get better, right, every day. And so how do we work with them when everything is developing at this breakneck pace, I think is an interesting point.
I mean, going back to LA as an example, and maybe they did it backwards, right? Maybe say, hey, we want to just build an AI platform, but instead maybe they should be thinking about, hey, what problems are we looking to solve, and how can AI technology fit into that? And so, that could be, among kind of the strategic, challenges or issues that they face. But, how do we actually practically approach co-design?
I mean, I think what you said is right. When I think about technology in the classroom, is what is it doing? What is the problem it's solving? What is the teacher struggling with right now? And how does that get better? And it's not, I have this new nifty widget and I'm just going to do this thing, but I really want to thoughtfully integrate it. And I think co-design gets at that. I think it's hard to do it at scale. I think it's hard to do it repeatably, but what we have learned at doing this, because it takes a long time, what we have learned is that you do get these themes and you do get these trends, and then hopefully you get better. But, as you said at the beginning, we certainly don't have all the answers, and we often get it wrong because it is really hard.
I'm going to ask Brent to speak on AI supports, because I like the way that Saga changes the vernacular. I mean, we don't talk about AI solutions. We talk about AI supports for teachers. Just even that subtle switch is powerful, I think. Sorry, Brent, go ahead.
Yeah, the direction I was going to go was, I was just thinking about the question of, Tom mentioned tutoring, right? Tom did not mention tutoring. Tom mentioned cheating. So the question I might ask is, like, if you're thinking about cheating, like when kids use technology to cheat and they use this new AI to cheat, and of course the answer to that is often yes, but maybe the more interesting question is, why are they cheating? And can you help to solve the problem of why are they cheating? And can the technology in some way support kids to be more interested in the learning process, as opposed to, I just want to get the right answer? Because if you just want to get the right answer, or say, hey, I finished this test and I'm done, right? Then there's the danger of, you're not actually learning anything. But that's not a new problem. Technology maybe facilitates cheating, but there's a more fundamental problem there.
What you're suggesting is, hey, look, potentially cheating with AI is really a symptom of a bigger systemic issue. And if a school district is concerned about cheating, and maybe we have to rethink of the conditions that have led to that, whether it's just like high pressure with standardized testing or things like that. And so addressing those head on actually is more important than just thinking about the means in which students could potentially cheat.
Yeah, and you could ask the question, right, how can technology support that goal? Or how can it sort of help to address the underlying issue, like the motivation for different kids to get them to want to do the work to figure out how to get to the right answer, as opposed to, I can just use the technology to get to the right answer. So that is sort of going the direction you're talking about, Sean, with.
I was just saying that if you had an AI bot in a classroom being able to pay attention to students' expressions, you would get the ability to synthesize the individuals sort of engagement levels in a way that the teacher could reflect on later. And it's not like you're replacing the teacher with with a bot, but you're giving the teacher something they can use to help bring kids along that are not coming along. In sense of, and I know that's just a random sort of far-fetched AI support that came to mind when I was thinking about what would you actually do in a classroom setting to use AI to help.
And I think it builds on what Brent was saying, and to your point, AJ, of, for a long time, the current curriculum is not that interesting or engaging, and we're seeing it get better. There are clearly examples out in the marketplace now that are more relevant. And another aspect of building on what Sean just said is, how do we, AI bots are really good at context, and they can provide really interesting on-the-fly context based on me and what I know. And so you could certainly imagine taking this problem or this set of curriculum and then really customizing it in an interesting way for me and for Sean and for Brent and for you, AJ. And I think that can happen in real time. And that's way less scary than having an AI bot, to me, having an AI bot drive, a math pedagogy and practice and multi-step equation and all those types of things that they're still currently struggling with.
And in the book, it says, when something is free, there is a high probability that you are the data or product they need. As you reflect on this quote, when AI tools are offered to districts at low or no cost, how should district leaders evaluate the potential trade-off in terms of data and ownership, or what are the steps that districts can take to ensure that they maintain control over the intellectual property or safeguard student data while they're accessing these types of technologies?
I think they need to be really aware, right? I mean, Google gives lots of its services away for free because they're mining the data. And yes, now finally that's outlawed from an educational standpoint. But as soon as those students graduate, it's not. And we've just trained them to do specific things and use specific things. And of course, we could talk for hours about, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and, pick your thing. So I think really understanding the privacy and who owns the data and what are they doing with the data. I'm encouraged by some of the large data standard organizations that are trying to move and provide commonality among districts and states, because there isn't a lot of standardization. And I think, we've seen many of these different privacy agreements over our years, and there's a huge range. And so, Saga has, this team here creates products and services that we provide, and we sell it because we have to, because it costs money to run, and we're not sharing data and we're not giving it away. And we take, student and teacher and tutor data very, very seriously. And so I think having those hard conversations with any vendor that you're engaging with, I think is a requirement.
And if you talk about those large organizations, they have the capacity to make, high quality tools freely available in the education market. They're essentially securing future customers, right? Getting them used to technology, workflows, everything else. And they might even have positive motivations too. But there is just the ability to make things free. And as soon as things are free in current U.S. education, they get rapidly adopted. And I don't even know the districts are going to control that, right? It's free to the students, it's free to the teachers. And I think it's a huge challenge for sort of our education system overall. How do we make good choices when there, the free choices out there?
And then on the other hand, if there's a price to using some of these platforms, then there's potential issues with access and equity, right? Because now if you're paying for a fee, certain students and communities will have access to platforms that have better, stronger capabilities than others, right? And so you can unintentionally create inequities that way. So that's another fascinating issue to wrestle with. What's your take on that, Sean? What comes to mind?
Well, I think education is a right, and therefore I think there should be a system in place by which high quality providers can put products in front of students and teachers, and they should be free to students and teachers, and yet the companies have to be compensated. And that's a problem that obviously involves government, philanthropic organizations, granting organizations. And I don't have the answer. I just feel like, for-profit generates great product. but for-profit education has always been a pain point for me, despite the fact that I've been in a for-profit education company. So I just think it's hard. It's a very hard problem. And I think, like a lot of hard problems with no market solution, governments are involved.
To me, this was probably the most evocative line that I read from the book so far. And in it, it says, unconscious bias has conscious consequences. But AI's foundation is its data. And if that foundation reflects historical production, the system echoes them, warping potential into a tool for perpetuating injustice. So as people who are leading the work and developing some of these sophisticated tools, like, what does this really mean to you and how you approach your day-to-day?
I mean, I think one thing is you want humans in the loop for the foreseeable future, right? That you have humans that are hopefully able to counterbalance those biases and then start to correct them, and hopefully giving those people, those teachers, those tutors, those educators, tools to make their jobs easier and to give them more time and capacity to start addressing some of those implicit biases. The hopeful side would be that the tools can start to help us make that progress as a society.
Yeah, there's an architecture that is I think commonly known as adversarial models, where there's a predictive model and there's a discriminator model, and the discriminator model's job is to call false on the predictive model. And so there's technology to Brent's point there. It's possible that the technology can actually help us recognize bias. And if you go ask GPT today for the top 10 topics in the universe that have more misinformation than information, it has an opinion on this, and they're not wrong. It's vaccinations. It's interesting. I don't know to what extent those types of questions have tailored responses, just because the companies that make large language models available to the masses are trying to get ahead of the fact that if you ask them, they can generate really crazy output if you ask them the right question, and people are constantly trying to do that, like me. And so, so there is hope that the models themselves will become self-reflective in some sense, or at least ability to self-discriminate against blatant falsehoods. And there is the curation problem, which I think you've alluded to, which is to say the way that you get better output from large language models is by curating the input.
Oftentimes the models and the work is created by the engineers that all look like us. And, there's historically you don't have to go back very far and you see these biases showing up in large companies. Google Gemini image generation comes to mind, for example. And so they're out there and they exist and they will get better. I am encouraged, as Brent and Sean shared, about maybe we can help the AI help recognize some of these, and maybe we use multiple of them to detect them. But it is really scary and it is real. One of the things that I love about the work that we've done, and Brent has led for many decades as we've worked together, is really partnering with leading research partners and then bringing that research into product, because it is really hard. And it is a thing that often people either overlook in their rush to get things to the market, or price sensitivity, or whatever it is. And that's not necessarily the case with research universities. And so one of the things we're doing right now is looking at, we have transcripts from last year's sessions that we've run within Saga. What are the biases, and how do we adjust that, and how do we remediate that? And so it is a real thing. We're working on it all the time, and I think some are. And so just being aware and, keeping the human in the loop for as long as is necessary, because the machine is going to get it wrong.
Last thing I want to share with each of you is this intersection of learning and artificial intelligence. And so in the book, there's a quote that says, how can we collectively guide educators and learners to embrace AI as a catalyst for thought and equitable outcomes, rather than allow it to supplant meaningful learning experiences?
I mean, I don't think it's another question where there are no easy answers. I mean, all these questions, right? We we don't have the answers. So, but I think these are the questions that we have to, as a society, figure out pretty quickly, like what these tools are going to be useful for, what they can do to actually strengthen those relationships that students have with educators, what their experience is with the materials they're working through.
So to follow on from Brent's points, I think every educator should be training their students to be apt and sophisticated users of AI supports, even the ones that exist in the marketplace today. But by training them to be so does not remove the teacher from and the emotional relationship that the teacher has with the student from the loop. I mean, in fact, it enhances it. I mean, when I have an engineer that solves a particularly difficult problem elegantly, I get literally excited and happy, and that excitement and happiness is communicated unambiguously, and they get excited and happy because I'm excited and happy. And that, I mean, honestly, if you took me out of the loop, they would be sad. But the point is that a lot of your self-satisfaction is about other people, other humans appreciating how clever you are, or how good your work was, or an insight that got them happy and excited. And to me, that's what education is so fun, and what makes teaching such a joyful experience. And so I don't think AI subtracts from that. I think we just have to, we have to just roll it into the loop and I teach students to use it as a tool.
I think that's beautifully said, Sean. In my most positive viewpoint of where AI is going is really empowering the teacher to do what they're there to do. It's to connect with students. It's to uplift them. It's to mentor them. It's to be a role model in their life, not so much of the heavy lifting from the administrative side. That we've really seen that shift in the last couple of decades. And it's such a loss. And, the average tenure of a teacher is 3 years, I think, at this point. It's abysmal. And so can we free them up from that burden, and can we really help them connect with kids? And that's my hope, is really empowering that.
So we are at time, but this isn't the only moment where we're going to have these conversations. And I think there's tremendous opportunity for us to continue to have these crucial conversations. And hopefully for the folks listening in, this has helped inspire you or supported your conversations with your colleagues, whether you're at the district level or you're running your own ed tech organization. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to continuing this conversation with you all in the future. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, AJ.